In the Middle East, U.S. destroyers are back at the center of hard power. But inside one of these warships, more than 300 sailors live inside just 509.5 feet of steel, with no real privacy, no stable ground, and no off switch. They sleep in stacked racks, work through heavy seas, launch helicopters, fight fatigue, and train for fire or flooding that could turn their home into a trap within minutes. This ship can fire missiles and track threats across the horizon, but its real test is simpler. Can the people inside keep functioning without breaking? Because this is not just a ship that sails and survives. An Arleigh Burke-class destroyer can conduct anti-air, anti-submarine, and anti-surface warfare at the same time. Launch Tomahawk cruise missiles, and on upgraded ships even help track and intercept ballistic missiles in flight. A Flight 2A destroyer stretches 509.5 feet, can run above 30 knots, and packs 329 sailors into a combat system that never really stops, even when the sea turns violent. Flight 2A and Flight 3 are upgraded versions of the same Arleigh Burke destroyer line, not different ship classes. They represent how the Navy kept evolving one warship design to carry more capability into a harder battle space. After the deadly 2017 destroyer collisions involving USS Fitzgerald and USS John S. McCain, the U.S. Navy was forced to treat fatigue as a direct operational risk. The lesson was brutal. Exhaustion at sea was not just hardship, it was a crack in readiness paid for in lives. That is why 3 or 4 hours of sleep is not a dramatic detail here. It means waking up inside the same steel box, pulling on the same uniform, and doing the same exact job again while your brain is still trying to catch up. The ship does not care whether you feel fresh when the next evolution starts. Helm orders still come, alarms still ring, and every tired sailor is expected to react with the speed of someone who slept in silence on land. And this is where homesickness hits harder than people expect. When almost nothing on the ship belongs only to you, a photo by your rack or a saved email can carry more emotional weight than its size has any right to carry. On a destroyer, you do not miss home only because home is far away. You miss it because inside a ship this tight, there are very few places where your mind can fully step out of the mission and feel like it belongs to you again. And the ocean tightens that pressure even more. It does not need to sink a destroyer to make life dangerous. It only has to keep the deck moving, the walls shifting, and the crew working through a world that never fully settles down. Now add one more layer. Flight 2A and Flight 3 destroyers can carry MH-60R helicopters, which means flight deck crews, launch procedures, fueling, maintenance, and another unforgiving process running on a moving patch of steel with almost no room for error. Sleep on a destroyer looks simple until you understand what it is protecting. A rack is not comfort. It is a narrow slot carved inside a machine where the crew gets just enough recovery to return to the next watch. And on some berthings, that compression becomes brutally concrete. 24 racks sharing just 3 sinks, 1 shower, and 2 toilets. Sailors get only a tiny space for photos, an emergency escape breathing device with about 15 minutes of air, and even hurricane straps to keep them from being thrown out of bed in rough seas. But that is only the visible layer. Fatigue is the deeper threat, because a sailor who is slow, unfocused, or mentally fogged can damage navigation, watch standing, maintenance, and emergency response before any enemy ever appears. That is why endurance and watch bill management had to be treated as operational protection, not just scheduling. On a destroyer, human rhythm is part of combat rhythm, and once concentration slips, risk starts spreading through the ship quietly. Even the quiet details reveal the pressure. A family photo near a bunk, a tiny storage space, or a short message from home can become emotional armor when your workplace, bedroom, and stress chamber all occupy the same steel world. You can be surrounded by hundreds of sailors and still feel alone. There are so few places where you can truly step out of the mission that solitude does not disappear. It just becomes compressed and harder to name. So the question is not whether sailors can sleep aboard a destroyer. The real question is whether they can sleep enough, recover enough, and hold themselves together long enough to keep the ship from losing rhythm under pressure. A destroyer does not stay effective because the crew has abstract toughness. It stays effective because ordinary things like food, water, medicine, inventory, workouts, and routine are managed with the same seriousness the ship gives to sensors and weapons. On Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, culinary specialists are expected to keep 3 hot meals moving every day, even while the crew rotates through watches and the ship keeps working around the clock. Behind it are storage limits, refrigeration, ordering plans, accounting, galley labor, and underway replenishment. The at-sea transfer system that keeps warships supplied without forcing them out of mission. In one 12-day period, USNS Robert E. Peary delivered pallets of cargo and more than 468,000 gallons of fuel to 9 warships. That number matters because it exposes how much hidden movement stands behind one ship that looks self-contained from a distance. Culinary specialists sit at the center of that pressure. They are not just cooking, they are forecasting demand, protecting stores, balancing books, maintaining equipment, and helping morale stay above water when deployment starts to feel endless and every day begins to look the same. And morale matters more than it sounds. On a destroyer, a good meal is not luxury. It is one of the fastest ways to restore rhythm, lower stress, and remind a tired crew that the system still works for them, not just through them. The same logic runs through physical fitness and medical support. The gym is small, the medical bay is compact, and both remind you that the ship is optimized first for mission capability, not long-term comfort for the human body. For sailors far from home, small breaks become disproportionately important. A better meal, a short workout, or a brief message from family can interrupt deployment's emotional blur and stop the ship from swallowing their whole personal identity. So, when people picture life aboard a destroyer, they usually imagine missiles, radar, and combat screens. What few people realize is that readiness also depends on coffee, clean trays, stocked refrigerators, basic treatment, and enough routine to keep homesick sailors from quietly flattening out. When heavy seas hit, normal actions start bending out of shape. Walking becomes bracing, carrying gear becomes timing, eating becomes balancing, and resting becomes an argument between your body and a steel frame that keeps changing angle under your weight. At first, the body fights back, headaches build, nausea comes fast, and even a short trip through the passageways can feel wrong, like your inner compass is breaking apart one correction at a time. Over time, many sailors adapt, but adaptation is not comfort. In rough water, people can still slam into a rack, lean against bulkheads just to move straight, and keep motion sickness medicine close because the ship can start rolling harder without much warning. And the sea does not strike alone. Combine rough motion with poor sleep, long watches, maintenance demands, and constant noise. And the result is layered pressure that keeps wearing down focus long after the cinematic moments are over. This is also where distance from home starts feeling heavier. USS O'Kane returned from a 7-month deployment, and USS Laboon spent 279 days deployed. Numbers like that explain why rough seas can grind emotionally harder than one bad night ever could. Now the real shape of the ship starts to show clearly. A destroyer is not harsh because the Navy forgot comfort. It is harsh because nearly every available foot of steel is serving a combat purpose before it ever serves a human one. Flight 2A and Flight 3 destroyers can carry 2 MH-60R Seahawks, and that changes everything. These aircraft are stored in aft-deck hangars and launched from the flight deck, which means the destroyer is not just carrying more firepower. It is carrying an entire aviation layer that has to be secured, fueled, guided, repaired, and recovered on a deck that never stops moving. The MH-60R is not decorative hardware. It supports anti-submarine warfare, surface warfare, command and control, logistics, search and rescue, and intelligence collection, which means one aircraft capability multiplies the number of jobs, checklists, and failure points the crew has to control. and the flight deck is one of the clearest examples of why life on this ship feels so compressed. It is not an airport runway. It is a small moving patch of deck, hit by wind, noise, salt, and sea motion, with almost no room for error. At sea, every helicopter evolution sharpens the risk. The deck moves, visibility shifts, rotor wash hits hard, and one sloppy moment can injure sailors or shut down capability. What few people realize is that this pressure extends far beyond the aircraft. A visible section of the ship's Mark 41 vertical launch system holds 32 missile cells for weapons like Tomahawks, ESSMs, and SM-2S, all managed by a central computer for multi-mission use. Up front, the 5-inch 127mm Mark 45 gun can fire roughly 16 to 20 rounds per minute out to about 13 to 20 nautical miles, tied into the wider Aegis combat system for layered defense. Up on the bridge, quartermasters track navigation. The conning officer calls the ship's movements, and the helmsman executes them through the wheel. Behind that visible layer, the Bridge and Combat Information Center fuse radar, networks, and weapon data into real-time decisions, turning the destroyer into a live battlefield node. That is why the strongest work on board often looks unimpressive from the outside. It happens during repetitive watches, maintenance rounds, system checks, fuel evolutions, inventory updates, and all the discipline tasks that never go viral but keep the ship from drifting toward failure. And if one of those linked systems really fails, the ship shows its hardest truth immediately. This place is home, but it can turn into a deadly emergency zone in minutes. When people imagine danger on a destroyer, they picture enemy missiles first. One of the hardest truths on board is that fire, flooding, and internal damage can turn the ship itself into the threat within minutes. That is why damage control is not a side skill. It is collective survival, built into drills, breathing devices, watertight procedures, and the expectation that sailors may have to save the ship while trapped inside it. After the 2017 collision involving USS Fitzgerald, sailors fought progressive flooding through 19 compartments for more than 16 hours. Cases like Fitzgerald and John S. McCain showed how fast routine at sea could become catastrophe. Suddenly, the quiet details make sense. The gear near the rack, the repeated emergency language, and the relentless training are there because on a destroyer, the line between home and crisis is frighteningly thin. If this step fails, the result is no longer another hard day at sea. It is lost sailors, a crippled ship, and a mission collapsing before the crew fully understands how fast the situation is spiraling. But this story is not only about danger, it is also about how crews protect morale long enough to keep functioning. Because no warship stays effective if the people inside emotionally flatten out. That is why steel beach picnics, better meals, civilian clothes for a few hours, and rare messages from home matter. For sailors away from family for months, small moments can stop deployment from swallowing every personal boundary they have. These sailors are not only manning weapons, they are preserving deterrence and response capability by keeping a complex combat system alive every day. Their work matters, because power at sea is not built only in moments of launch or impact, but in the quiet discipline that keeps the whole machine from slipping. The world sees a destroyer as an icon of American sea power. What it rarely sees is that this power stands on sailors who live cramped, work tired, miss their families, and keep a warship from slipping out of rhythm in heavy seas. So, if this video opened a hidden layer for you, leave a like and subscribe. And if you are curious how captains live on giant aircraft carriers, do not miss the next video because that world is bigger and harsher than it first looks.